Behringer X32 digital console, 40 inputs, 16 outputs, fully automated, so every fader is automated, it's controlled. So when you change, they move for you, so it makes it easier. We'll go through the input side of it first, like we did last time, and then we'll go to the output side. So the fundamentals, the basics of this mixer is, we'll go kind of channel by channel. When you hit select on a channel, on an input over here, I was clipping, I turned myself down too to help you out. When you hit select on a channel, then everything that is on the top section here becomes active for that channel. So all of these controls are active for Dale, which I am Dale right now. I don't know who Dale is, but I will be Dale, as well as whatever you see on the screen is active for that channel as well. So right now we're looking at channel 1. If I hit channel 7, then all of this is for channel 7, for 15, so on, so on. So we'll go through the basics of what is up here. The first and most important section that you'll have will be your input gain, which will be right at the top here. The input gain you want to set before you do anything else, which we talked about a minute ago. You want to get your average input gain in the -9 to -6 range comfortably. If you have somebody that has a really wide range of talking, then maybe set them a little bit lower, because when they start talking loud, then you start clipping like I'm doing right now. So you do have to take that into consideration, and you'll know that by who your speaker is. But on average, you want to be in the -6 to -9 range. That gives you enough clean, good audio coming in that you don't have to really crank anything later on. You can just run everything normal without having to dime something. If you have it set too high where you're clipping, the red light is on, then every audio after that is going to have some sort of static distortion in it, and that doesn't sound very good, as you would have heard from the first minute of the recording. So that is the first and most important thing that you want to set on any input. When someone walks up, you want to get that input gain set and then go from there. Also on this first module here, we have 48 volts, so any condenser microphone that you run, which we have a couple, the two that are in the piano require that. Your hanging choir mics require it. So when you have something that requires phantom power, you would just hit 48 volts. That would turn that on. I'm not going to do it because it's a wireless. We don't need that. But you would turn that on at that point, and it'll remember that. For example, we have it turned on for the piano mics. So first major section, once you're on a channel, set the input gain. If you need phantom power, you technically would set that first and then do the input gain, which you would quickly figure out if you needed phantom power, because you won't be getting any input. So that's the first section here. Right next door to it, they have what's called a low cut, or more commonly known as a high pass filter. So what this allows you to do is you can essentially cut a section of frequencies specifically on the low end. I use this as an anti-feedback tool, as well as a way to just kind of clean up a mix. I usually set for like vocals, I set it around maybe 100 hertz, same with acoustic guitars, that type of deal. Pianos maybe in the 80 to 90 range. Nobody sings down there. That's the only thing that operates in that frequency band would be bass guitar, kick drum. If you mic up a cajon, that'll be in that range, like a CD player, iPod, that type of deal. Anything that is a seriously low frequency would be the only thing in that range. So you can, to turn it on, you would just hit the button. When it's yellow, that means it's active. So and you can see it on the screen here where you are affecting it. So it'll tell you both on the dial, I'm around like 120, or it'll tell you on the screen, I'm at 104 hertz right now. And I guess I can't dial in 100 specifically. So 101 is what we get. But that would be the next thing that I would set. I automatically set that on all my vocals, all my instruments. Just, they're not going to operate in that range, so I'm just going to eliminate those frequencies just so it's not bleeding through and making noise. So that's the first module that you get up there. Those are the first couple things that you want to set. The next module down here would be all of your dynamics. So they give you a built-in noise gate on every channel, as well as a built-in compressor on every channel. If you notice the little button that says View, they have that next to each module. That'll take the screen to whatever you are working on right then. So noise gate, what that does, you can set it at a minimum decibel level, minimum volume level, where whatever audio is coming in, it will not go through until it reaches that volume level. So for example, not the best application, but if you had a drum set and you had a snare drum microphone, all you want that microphone to pick up is the snare drum when you had that crack sound. You don't want it to pick up a hi-hat or anything else around it. So if you set that gate up to a certain point, then it's not going to pick up all the other sounds around, only when that loud snare drum crack hits. Same thing if you have just a couple live microphones, nobody's using them at the moment, so you don't want them just picking up the air noise or whatever else is going on in the room. You can set a gate so they're not going to pick up anything until someone actually comes over and hits that minimum decibel level. So a gate can be a tool or a curse, depending on how you set it. If you set it too high, someone's going to walk up and they're still talking and you just don't even hear them. So you want to make sure that you get it set to the right spot. They do give you the blue moving point here is the audio coming in on the microphone. So you can see it's in, I'm not worried about that. I just stopped talking to show the light. When I'm not talking, the blue light sits way down here past my minimum point. So that it's not allowing anything to go through when I'm not talking.
What's the red coming out there?
The red is, it's eliminating other audio, essentially. So when it doesn't have any audio, then it just kind of shuts itself down all the way. So if I set that gate too high, like my average audio is on the top end here. If I set that gate too high, which you'll hear on the recording in a second, suddenly you're not hearing me come through anymore. So that'll be funny on the recording. So if you set that too high, then you're going to either not hear anything or every other word is going to start jotting in and out. I should probably do that on a different channel instead of the ones trying to hear me. But so you want a gate is a good idea just to eliminate, first of all, feedback. If you have a mic sitting there and there's a monitor sitting there and suddenly you have the whoo, that's a good way to eliminate that. So it's not picking it up, as well as just crosstalk between other things that are going on. Just a great tool to be able to use. So input gain, low cut, noise gates, those are the first major things you want to set up. The next module over would be a compressor. So I still don't have a great definition of a compressor, but essentially what it does, it takes your lowest point of your audio and your highest point, and it makes everything sit in this range. So you can't get louder than this point and you can't get quieter. It just brings everything into this range. So it can really increase the overall tone and effect of what your vocals and instruments can sound like if you set it right. Also, if you set it wrong, then it can really squash and kind of harshen everything. So less is definitely more on that, but same concept. It's a compressor and expander, I guess. So it bring.
What works on the top end where you cut off, like they give above a certain amount?
That'd be the compress. So you're compressing it down, and then otherwise expander is bringing the floor up. So it's bringing whatever your quietest point is and bringing it up to at least to this minimum. That'd be your threshold. Would be the control on that. It's probably picking you up, except for my noise gate that I turned on. So I turned the noise gate down so you guys can be heard through there too. So yeah, with the compressor, they do give you a lot of additional controls on here, which you can control using the knobs on there. Otherwise, just a general, you can see when you're starting to actually compress based on, so I'm essentially setting where the top end of my audio would be right now. So it's essentially eliminating some of the peaks at the top, which isn't much. If I start moving it down here, you're going to start squashing quite a bit. It's not going to sound as good. Sorry, recording people. But essentially, you can get it right around in there, and it's going to just kind of smooth out that signal, especially if you have somebody that has a very broad range of where they sing, then a compressor is a good tool. We had a worship leader that he had the loudest voice when he went into his upper register. So the first Sunday that we had the board, we had that compressor set up, and there was like the point in the song where you know he's going to do in the octave jump, and he did it, and then we're like, oh, it did it. And it was great. It held him in check, and it was terrific. So very good tool there that you can use as well, as long as you're within the boundaries of not cutting too much, then it's going to mess it up.
Or a minister that gets very loud at particular
Yes.
And soft. And then
Yep. Yep, that helps keep them in that audible range.
I think the key point is not to overdo it.
Yep.
Right?
Yep, moderation on everything. With compressor, with effects, if you add effects onto things, moderation, less is more. So next section over would be the equalizer, which looks very different than any other equalizer from the previous mixer. Before you just had bass, mid, I think a sweepable mid-range, and then high, mid, and treble?
No, just high.
High, okay.
3-band.
3-band with sweepable mid, that's right. I used to have the 32 channel before we went with this one. So this essentially operates the same, except for when you moved low on that, you were just controlling, I think, 80 hertz. Now when you move low on this, you can select what frequency you want that to be. You can move it anywhere you want it to be. So essentially it's a 4-band parametric EQ. You can access each band by hitting low, low mid, high, and those correspond with a number on here. So 1 being the low. And this will probably sound funny on the recording as well. Maybe I can just use a different channel to control that. That'd probably be a better idea for my demo. Well, I don't need to initially have audio, but so your 3 main controls that you have would be gain, which you can see will either increase or will decrease. I guess you can't see that too well on the screen, but you can increase how much of that frequency you want or decrease cut. You can also, if you go to frequency, you can change which frequency you want to affect. And then your Q is how narrow or broad of a range you want that to affect. So with the EQ, more commonly, you would do cuts rather than add. So if you're listening to something, the best way to go about it is to, like, you hear a frequency and you're like, you know, it would sound better if this was kind of gone. The best way to do it is to do a big peak like this and just start going along until you hear it. And you're like, until it sounds the worst, essentially. And you hear that rah, rah, rah frequency, then you know you found it. Then do a cut on that frequency. That's the best way to go through and find those, is to really find the worst frequency, and it'll be very obvious.
And
then
during practice.
please do it
right?
during practice.
Yes, not during the service.
My sound guy has somehow perfected being able to do that mid-sermon and only have me notice and nobody else. I don't know how he does it. He has a magic ear, but suddenly I'll hear something move and I'll look at him, he'll smile, and nobody else notices. But general rule of thumb, I would do it during practice, sound check only. Unless it is just crucial that something has to change, then tastefully go for it. But typically you want to go through, find those bad spots, or if you have a frequency, especially on like a pulpit mic or a live mic that is constantly feeding back, like a mic has a tendency to feed back, then you can do essentially what's called ringing it out, where you'll find that frequency and it'll go right away, and then you can notch that one out of there, and that should take care of a lot of your feedback problems, which we have, I think, 4 frequencies notched on our pulpit mic because that thing just wants to go. So yeah, with any mic that gets passed around, or if it doesn't look like you guys have one at the pulpit, which is good, that helps, I would go through in a setting like this when nobody's in here, because it's kind of loud and annoying, but I would ring that out and find what frequency that is and just take care of those problem ones up front. That makes it a lot easier on the back end. What you can do, there's a couple ways you can ring the mic out, and what I would do for that, turn off the noise gate, crank up the gain, set the mic in the middle of the room, and just turn up the volume till you start to get that woo, and find what frequencies it wants to go with.
Okay.
and then notch those, and that gives you a good starting point.
Is
'Cause
that much different than when there's a lot of people in here?
So some other options that you have on your EQ is the type of arc you want to use. So right now we have it on PEQ, which is most commonly what you're going to use, where you can select a specific frequency. If you are on the high end, you have the option for what they call a high shelf, which you can see how it takes this whole area and brings it up instead of a set curve. It takes a whole, adds a shelf up there. You can do a high shelf, or you can do a high cut, similar to what we did on the low side. You can do a high cut. It depends on the application. I have a high cut on something at church, and I don't remember. I think we have it on our piano just because we were getting some shrilly noise and our sustain pedal squeaks a little bit. So I kind of rounded it off to eliminate some of that. So it's focused. Hey, it happens. So you do have those options, and that's just by hitting mode here. You can either run it as a normal curve like that, or you can bring it up as a shelf where it boosts an area, or a cut where it's just going to eliminate everything at that point.
Is it the high that does it or all of them?
You can put any frequency anywhere technically, but most commonly they call it a high cut or high shelf. But you do have the same option for on the low end, a low cut or low shelf, which we already set up a low cut in the initial section. A lot of that is just doing your setup initially ahead of time, doing your homework, knowing what is going to happen, ringing out, having everything kind of EQ'd before a service. Because the more you do on the fly, the more noticeable your problems are going to be, and then that's when people get upset.
Yeah.
So the goal of
Thinking about your sound adjustments. and
right,
stuff.
the goal of a sound guy is to be invisible. They want to come in. You want them to be able to come into the service and not notice anything about you. That means that it was a good morning, because everything just
What does he do back there?
right. Somebody get that guy a chair. Have him go sit down somewhere. Tell him why is he standing there. So that is the basic concept of the EQ. So you have 4 bands that you can move around. You can increase or decrease those frequencies. You can do a shelf, or you can cut something. And like I said, the goal of an EQ isn't to necessarily boost or add a bunch of areas. The signal coming in should sound good. Microphones are good. You want to represent that audio well. So the goal is to eliminate things that don't sound good more than boost. When you start boosting things, then typically you're going to run into other things not sounding as good because of it. So cuts are better than boosts. Good on EQ. And a good thing, and we've been doing this with our sound guys, is do some kind of ear training and some reading, understanding. Because when I say the word frequencies to most sound guys that haven't been using like an intense EQ like that, they're like, what's a frequency? Like, I don't understand. So to really understand what lines up in different frequency ranges, to get that in your head really makes everything a lot easier. So if you understand that an acoustic guitar kind of sits between 200 megahertz and like 3K, and then a vocal sits in this area and this sits there, it really helps out. That way you can narrow down what you're looking at.
Is there something online available, or it's
You can Google and YouTube all day and find a million results that all line up. I don't have a good resource. I just Googled and I found a lot of stuff really quick. There's also apps out there, and one of my guys at church has this, and I think I sent it
send it to me?
to you. I remember sending it, where it's an ear training, where I think it rings a frequency, and then I think it shows you, and so you can really develop your ear so you know what you're listening to in different ranges. So that's a great tool to. It's really annoying because you're just hearing,
Yeah.
but it's a very good tool to get that knowledge, because then when you get into a service and you hear something feeding back, whoop, it's like, oh, that's 500 megahertz or 500 hertz. So that's most of this top section. So when you hit select, all of this comes active for that channel. Input gain, gate, compressor, EQ. The next module over, you have your sends, and this is one of 2 ways to do your bus sends. I never use this part of it, but I'll show you. It's essentially like turning up on the old mixer, aux 1, aux 2, aux 3. That's what this is. So you have, this is going to your sends that we have over here, which like your foyer, your nursery, your video left and right, monitors, that type of deal. So right now we're on 1 through 4, so it's 1, 2, 3, 4. When you go to the next button, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, so on and so on. So you can go by channel, and I need to send Jeff to, they need to hear him in the foyer, then I can turn him up going to the foyer, so on and so on. Or if we're going to the video, then we can turn me up in the, oh, that's Jeff though. Turn him up in the video. So you can, that's kind of one way that you can do it. That's the older way. We'll look at outputs in a minute, and I'll show you a much easier way that you can get through things there. So that's the basics on the input side. You have 4 buttons on this side. This controls what layer you're on. So we have 32 microphone inputs. So 1 through 16 are laid out here. 17 through 32 are here. And then the third layer has our music coming in. So like we have an iPod input, the Mac left and right is coming in there, or Mac left and left right now. And then CD left and left. How did I do that? So CD player input would be there as well. That's all on your third layer under the auxiliary ins. And then you have an effect return volume there, which leave them at 0. I'll show you the other volumes on the other side. And then if you ever needed to, you do have a bus master as well. So your 16 outputs on the 4th layer here, you can control them here, or you can control them on this side, which is fun to watch, and because it's the same thing. So if you really want to play with someone's mind, you can do that. But that would be the main options of the left side, the input side there. The one side. On the right side of the board, these would be all of your outputs. So we'll start in the middle of this section with, since we were just talking about it, your bus sends. So on other boards, they're considered aux sends or monitor sends. They're going to be labeled. Behringer labels them mix bus or bus sends. So essentially we have 16 designated outputs that we can control individually. We can send whatever we want to every one. And we're using them to send to the foyer, to the nursery. That way? Mm-hmm. Yep. Lucky guess. A left and right video feed, as well as we have 4 monitor channels that we are using right there as well. So we have 16 sends, so bus 1 through 8 right here, and then 9 through 16. Technically the last 4, but can be changed, of the bus sends are being used for effect volumes. We have 4 main effects that we can utilize for reverbs or delays or anything that we want to use, which we will get there in a minute. So for our mix bus sends, there's 2, like I said a minute ago, there's 2 ways that you can send audio to a mix bus. You can do it per channel by hitting that channel and turning up whichever one it is. The other way is my recommended and preferred way. If you hit select on a mix bus, then now we are mixing for that mix bus. And then there is this little pivotal button here called Sends on Fader, and it blinks red when it's active for a reason. So when that is blinking, and that says select, everything that I do over here now is mixing to go to that mix bus. So if it's not blinking, I'm mixing to the main output, the left and right, like normal, so what I hear out here. When I hit Sends on Fader, everything that I move here now is changing what we hear in the foyer. Or if I go to nursery, then everything I hear in the nursery. Or video, then everything I hear in the video. So Sends on Fader is the make or break button of the mixer, because if you don't remember that you are on Sends on Fader, then you are messing up a mix somewhere. So say you walk up and somebody had it on Sends on Fader, and you're listening to the room and you're trying to turn down or turn up Dale, then you're turning up, and you're not hearing any difference. Meanwhile, he's screaming out in the foyer or in the recording. You want to make sure that you know when Sends on Fader is on, because otherwise you're just going to make a big old mess. So we'll go back and do that again. I want to change what I'm hearing in the nursery. So I hit select, I hit Sends on Fader, and now everything over here is being sent to nursery. Anything I do here is going to be heard differently now going to the nursery. So that would be how, if I put in a pair of headphones and I want to mix what's going to the video, I can hit solo, bring up my headphones, and I can listen what's going to the video and mix what's going to the video feed, or mix what's going to the nursery feed. So it allows you to do that and actually have a visible representation of what you're doing instead of going per channel to. It makes it a lot easier. That is one of the biggest advantages of going with the digital board, is being able to mix that way instead of individual knobs here and there. So, like I said, you have 16 mix bus sends that you can use. Sends on Fader is the best way to be able to send to those. Any questions there? So same rules apply, just like when we were on a channel over here and we went to the EQ. Same rules apply over here. If you hit select on a channel, then you can view the EQ, you can compress the outputs, you can do those same things. So I have, on the outputs, they give you 6 bands instead of 4 bands like the inputs. So I can EQ our monitor sends, I can EQ the video send if I want to. All the same rules apply. To get to the 5th and 6th band, because you only have 4 buttons, if you just hit the 2 at the same time, that gives you one of them, and then hit the 2 at the same time, that gives you your other. So you have 6 bands available to be able to cut, boost, anything like that.
And I'm assuming you can try to get like a flat signal into it and then adjust the output equalizers to get you a fairly flat response. You're trying to equalize the room at that point.
Right.
Or whatever the
Right.
devices that you feed.
Right. So if you're playing with the EQ on the foyer, then most likely you're going to want to be out there where listening, probably using the tablet to do it, and mixing it from there. Same with the nursery, or the video you can do through headphones on that end. Monitor you can do up on stage. You can EQ it just like you would do your main speakers. So, yeah. Make sense?
Yes.
Cool. The next section over then, or next button up, would be, it says group, which DCA 1 through 8. So DCA would be digitally controlled audio. So essentially what they give you 8 channels, and you can use them as a master volume for anything individually or group on this side. So for example, one of the main ways that I would utilize it, we have 4 choir mics coming in here, which I see, yeah, there's 4. I just now noticed the far right one, it blends in really well. So we have 4 choir mics coming in, and say I have those balanced out based on the group that's up there, but they are just too loud. I don't want to have to try and keep the balance between that group equal, moving them up and down. I just want a master volume for them. That's what the DCAs are there for. So what I can do, I hold down select, and then anything that I want to be controlled by that, I select and let up. So now when I turn up or down this DCA, it is a master volume for this group of channels, because I assigned them to that. So I can increase the choir or bring down the choir. Or for example, we have 2 piano mics on here, one for the high or the treble side, one for the bass side. Once we get that balanced out the way we like it between the 2 mics, I don't want to have to mess with that balance. So I can assign them to a DCA, and now I always just have a piano volume right here. So that makes it easy. I use mine at church in the aspect where I like to be able to just stay on my first layer and mix. I don't want to have to switch layers a lot. So anything that's on my second layer are my kind of bulk things. So I have 4 drum mics, I have my piano left and right, I have my keyboard left and right, and then I just utilize a DCA for those, so I can stay on my initial layer, and then I just have my drums, my grand piano, and my keyboard, so that way I can mix everything right in front of me instead of having to go through layers. So, like I said, very easy to set up. You just hold select, and then select whatever you want to be on that. And then when I turn it up or down, then it'll be very apparent.
Slides on that side don't move. Does that mean it's just being done digitally?
Being done digitally, yep. It's not going to move those. Essentially, those are going to this at Unity, and then you can increase or decrease from there. Take those off of there. But you have 8 of them available, so I even have one assigned for my CD player and my DVD player coming in, because I don't even have to go to my 3rd layer at that point. You can use them for anything you want there. So let's continue on. So that was all of our input side of things. That covers all of our outputs. Most of our outputs, the next one over would be our main output, which is what we hear in the room. So you have a fader, you have a mute button if you want to mute the overall output to it. If you hit select, once again, you do have a 6-band EQ. You have a compressor if you want to EQ the room, although you guys have processing that it probably already takes care of that, so you shouldn't need that. But that's all of the output aspect of it. So another module that we can tackle here in a minute would be the mute groups down here, which is a great tool. I have, I think, 3 or 4 mute groups assigned on our board, depending on what we need to mute at the time. But it allows you to do a mass mute instead of having to go and turn everyone off, which is highly annoying. Right, it doesn't work. What it allows me to do, I can hit one button and it'll mute everything that I've assigned it to mute. So up at the top, you have a button, second from the bottom here, called Mute Group. Hit it, it lights up. Hold down Mute Group, and whatever you want this mute to mute, then it will do. So say I want to do all of my instruments, drum, guitar, violin, bass. Assign them, hit Mute Group again, so you're not in that menu anymore. Now, when I do it, it mutes all of those at the same time, which makes it much easier on life. I could do another mute group. I could do all of my vocalists together. So now I can, no, I did it wrong. Mute group, gotta hit select. So now I can do my vocalists on one, my instruments on one. I can put both of my, I assume they're both pastors because they have the individual names. You could do, I shouldn't do those because then I can't talk. But you can assign them to whatever you want, and you can do them by scene. So they'll change if you, for the week with the horns, the week with the strings, you can do individual mute groups. It'll remember them on the scene when you save it. So.
Is there a way to know? Other than label this?
We can label them.
You have to put a little label over the number or something? What do you guys do, or you just memorize it?
I just know what they are. The main one that we use is 2 that mutes every mic and instrument on the stage other than the pulpit. Go to home at the top, that takes you to the home screen for whatever channel you have selected. So you can see some of the basics of everything that's going on. So if you have it assigned to a mute group, it'll light up what mute group that channel is on. What if you have it assigned to a DCA, it'll show you what DCAs it is controlled by there. If you have a compressor or a gate or an EQ turned on, they light up yellow down there so you know what it's going to. If it's going to, that channel is going to a bus send, and if your outputs, it shows you how much. So we have this going to the nursery right now. It'll show you all of that on your home screen. You have page select down here. When you hit those, it tabs through the different tabs at the top. So you can go to configure, which you won't have to do too much to, which I'll show you an option there in a minute. You can see the options for your gate, your compressor, your EQ, and then all of the sends that you are going to as well. An option in here for configure, and you guys had talked about being able to jump around channels, draw them from different inputs, all of that. That is done under the configure tab. So if you go to a channel, under the configure, it says source. So that is telling you where that channel is getting its audio from. So right now, it is getting it from input 5. So, which makes sense, we're plugged in channel 5. But say I want to draw, we have a mic coming into whatever up there, and it's plugged into input 15 on the back of the board. I can go here, I can scroll down to 15, hit select, and now I am drawing that audio from input 15 on here. Okay, so that's done under the configure tab on each channel. You can select where you're drawing audio from. I'll put that back so we don't mess everything up. So if it says in and then the number, that means that it's local. That's coming straight into the board. Once we get the snake hooked up, it'll say A and then the number, because that would be AES50A, which is the Cat5 input or output. So that'll be one thing you'll have to distinguish later once we get that hooked up, if it's plugged in local or through the snake. But for now, it just says in, which means the board, and then what channel it's coming in. So I can go to any channel out of my 32 and draw audio from any channel out of my 32 and put them in. It's okay, we can mute them. So that's a good tool. You shouldn't have to, if you...
Once it's plugged in the back, we shouldn't have to be plugged in.
Right, you shouldn't have to do anything back there. But also, once we get everything wired up with the snake correctly up there, you shouldn't have to do any of this. Because then we'll have a designated guitar channel, designated violin channel routed through, so that you shouldn't have to do much moving at all there. It should just be set, ready to go. So, home screen, tab over to configure, and then select your source. You can thumb through, it won't activate until you hit select. So that's done there. So going back up here, that was under home, that'll take us to that channel. If you hit meters, what this does, this shows me all 32 inputs and what audio is going through them and how much. So if you have something that's feeding back somewhere and you have no idea what or where, just go here, because it'll be red. It'll be nice and bright red at the top. It also shows you what channels are being affected by a gate. The fader will be lit up red here if you have it muted, which you can see. They'll light up red there. Also, the bottom shows you how much a compressor is working down there. It shows you how much is being activated there, which we can, so, is it working? Check, 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 check. Maybe it's not. Check, 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 check. I don't want to play with compressor too much, but that'll show that down there as well for the gain reduction. So that's under meters. You can also see all of your outputs. You can see the meters for your auxiliaries, which would be your CD player and all that. So you can tab through there under meters and be able to, I like to just leave that up as just in case I need it type of deal. And then once I need to EQ something, then I'll just hit view and it'll jump me over to whatever I need to see. But that's where I usually just generally leave it, just as a good tool. Next tab down would be routing. You shouldn't have to do much of anything in here. The only time we'll do anything in here is when we add the snake, then we'll change how some things are routed. Right now, everything's routed to assign channels, all 32 on here to all 32 on here. Once we hook up the snake, then it'll take 16 from there and put it here, as well as 16 from here and put it here. So, routing, general rule of thumb, don't touch, because then I have to come visit. Next one down would be setup. These are a lot of your general options for the board. So you can change the date and time. You can change the brightness and contrast of your scribble strips, as well as your main screen. That's all in here. Configure a lot of to control, just a lot of different options are in here. Your pop-ups and some mutes and different things like that. You shouldn't have to do much. Your network, IP address, we went over that, but that's all under there. Scribble Strip is the main thing that you use under setup. If you're at the board, that's how you relabel each one of these guys, name, color, picture, that type of deal. So you would go to setup, Scribble Strip. You can select whatever color you want. You can select a picture. You can use one of their names, or you can hit edit and type in your own name. It is easier to type them on the app because you actually get a keyboard, but you can do it on here. So that's under Scribble Strip. You can change the name, picture, everything of all of your inputs, all of your outputs, your effects, everything you can, it's all customizable. So that's all under the Setup tab. The next one down, we'll talk about saving things a minute. This is the library. So what the library allows you to do, I can save individual presets, up to 100 of them. So that would be, for example, we have Dale's mic right now. Once we get Dale in here, we set his input gain, we get him EQ'd. If we get some compression on it, it sounds great. We will take this channel then, and we'll go up here and we'll hit Save Preset, and we will type in Dale instead. I'll build one for you. Yeah, otherwise he would get abbreviated. So we hit save, I labeled him Dale, I'm hit save, and over at preset, yes. So now I have Dale saved in the library. So on any one of my channels, I can hit, we'll go to a bogus channel, I can hit select and then load preset. I can bring Dale and his input gain, his EQ, his effects, everything, and I can assign him to any channel I want. So we'll hit load preset, yes. Now you can see, not on the screen anymore, but you can see Dale ended up on channel 24 because that's where I wanted him to go. So it'll remember his EQ, everything. So if, for example, if you have 6 vocalists, but you only have 3 at a time, you can save individual presets for each one. You don't know who's going to be there that week. So suddenly Cheryl walks in and you're like, oh, well, just grab the red mic and then go to, or grab this mic, vocal 2 in channel 8, and you can just go to that channel, go to your library, grab Cheryl's preset, throw it in. Now you don't have to start over an EQ her. You've already done your homework. So it gives you a lot more consistency. You can. So it gives you a lot more consistency week by week, especially if you have multiple teams, multiple musicians, multiple vocalists. You can just automatically save those people, those characteristics, and load them in, and it makes it a lot easier.
Would it be good?
So with the library, like I said, you can save up to, I guess it's it's 100 different things. They give you a ton of preset ones in there. I've never used any of them. I just went through and started renaming them and took up that spot, all those spaces for my things. I have, I think, 40 or 50 whatever things saved in there between instruments and individual vocalists. So to do that again, like I said, you would just go to that channel, get everything set the way you want it, and then the button down here would be save. You can name it whatever you want, hit save, and yes. So now everything that I've done for Dale's voice, his input gain, compressor, gate, EQ, all that is assigned to Dale right here. So then I can go through and set up Jeff and save Jeff as number 2, or save Cheryl or whoever, whatever you want to do, and save it in there. And then to recall it, you would just go to whatever channel you're on, hit load preset, yes. So I want to put Dale here, so I put Dale there. You can move them anywhere you want them. So that makes sense? Yeah. Cool. So that's the library. Library allows you to do individual channels saving. On a more global mass approach, the module over here says scenes. So if I hit view on this, no, it's fine. It's right there. So you can do scenes. So what a scene remembers is everything. So it'll remember any individual presets that you assign to it. So Jeff's vocal, this, that. Oh, I see you're working on things. Well, see, Scribble Strips are all different. It'll remember every individual preset you put in there. It'll remember every level of your inputs, your outputs, your effects, everything. It will remember on a global scale. You can save up to 100 scenes on there. I have a basic one called Harvest Main that I just put in there while I was making everything. So you can go to Harvest Main and hit save, name it whatever you want. You can add some notes if you want and save it. So now Harvest main looks like that. So then if I, let's we'll make another one that looks just a little bit different for a good example to move a bunch of things. We'll save, and we'll make this one Harvest main 1. Save. So now we have Harvest main 1 and Harvest main. So if I want to change back to the other show, then it goes back to everything that I had from before. So you could label them, I don't know what type of mixes you use, but you could have one labeled String Sunday, Hip Hop Sunday, anybody? Accordion Sunday. You can have them labeled that way, and that way when you walk in, you know that these vocalists are going to be there, these instruments are going to be there, what inputs they're coming in, the mix between them that you wanted, it's all going to be there. So we run a couple different vocal teams. We have 2 vocal teams and 2 leaders. So I have 4 scenes saved based on those combinations. So that brings up all of those people's presets on a scene. So you can go to view and then thumb through them that way, or you can use them right in a row. You can change mid-service without really affecting or changing the world. So like we had a big Christmas service where we had like 4 different special numbers, and they were all using the same mics, but everything was completely different between them. So I saved 4 or 5 scenes for one Sunday night, and we'd get done with our special number. I would just hit next, go, and then it would go. Except for I can turn off the pop-up so it automatically goes. But you would get done, and you would hit next or previous, and it says at the top of the screen which one you're going to go to. It says the name up there, so you can see what scene you're going to, which I need to turn off the pop-up, but it'll allow you to do that. So the scenes are just an incredible way to have a lot more consistency between different weeks, so that way you can remember, or it remembers, everybody's individual presets and the volumes that you had between the band or the instruments. So it just makes it a lot nicer there. Yes. Right, you do a rehearsal on Wednesday afternoon, and then there was an event on Friday, and they moved everything, so then you can just come in Sunday morning and recall what you had saved. Yes. Or a youth concert. Youth, you're so loud. So it just allows you to be able to do that and get a lot more consistency and cut your work level down, because instead of having to walk in, okay, let's set input gain again, EQ again. It's like, no, you already did it. Recall, it's already there. So scenes are a wonderful, wonderful tool. That is most of it. The next thing that we have would be effects, which, like we said earlier, you want to use moderately, or within moderation. Too much effect will be a distraction. Not enough effect can sound dry. So I just basically use a couple different reverbs just to add a little flair. I don't use it on any of my talking vocals, just singing vocals or instruments. Yes. So it just adds a little life, a little presence to it. Singing vocals, I add it to any acoustic guitars, on a violin. I have a separate one for some drums, so just basic things like that. So just on mainly on our kick drum and snare drum we use it. So covers up a little bit of the mess. So if you go to bus 9 through 16, you see the main volume for your initial 4 effects here. So that is how you control essentially the volume for them. To route channel to that, it's the same as sending to, it's a mix bus. So you can just select that effect, send on fader. I want to send my 4 vocalists to that. So it's done the same way as sending to the video or the foyer or narthex, depending on who you are. So it allows you to be able to do that very easily as far as sending audio to that. As far as changing and affecting that effect, at the top, you have the tab Effects. So you would hit that, and On the home screen, the left side, you see your 4 main effects that you're able to use. Those would coincide with these 4 channels down here. So what you can do, this knob down here, second from the right, this allows you to change which effect you want to use. So you have a pretty extensive list. I think there's like 8 or 9 reverbs and then a lot of compressors and EQs and all sorts of other fun things that you shouldn't use. Built-in effect modules. It's the same as having a rack with these individual effects. They've modeled those sounds and given you all of those in here. So you can go to Vintage Reverb, hit Set, and if I hit the button next to it, Edit, it takes me to that reverb unit. So now you can see the individual controls of that unit. As far as pre-delay, I grabbed a weird delay for demonstration, so I shouldn't have done that, but we'll go to a basic one. Hall reverb will be pretty standard. So you can see all of your normal controls. Pre-delay, decay is how expands or how long you want that reverb to latch on. Size would be like the size of the room, and then level would be the overall volume of that reverb. So you can go through and do edits on there for that. So I would just set up a basic vocal reverb and maybe a guitar one. That looks like the only things that you'll really use it for. So like I would do like bus 13 vocal reverb, get just a basic reverb, put it in light, you don't need a lot of it, and then just route each of your vocalists to it. And then I would set up another one, maybe instruments or guitars, and send like your guitar and your violin to it, that type of deal. And just use a little bit of splash of color on them, essentially. It won't be much.
And then how do you specify where the output of that reverb goes?
It automatically, the 4 effects, they automatically go to the main output. Mm-hmm.
Okay. And if you wanted to route that to another, like
You asked me that last time. Did I ever accomplish that?
to the recording for the DVD or something like that, or the live stream or something.
Yep, you can do it. I don't know if I answered it last time. So what you can do, say we want to send those vocal effects to our video recording, which is live stream. Would that be the same one? You can hit that one. You can hit Sounds on Fader, and if you go to the bottom tab over here, Busmaster, which is essentially the same as this, just put over here, you see all 16 outputs. You can see our 4 effects are there, so I can send as much of that effect channel as I want to my video recording, so on and so on. So you can control how much of that effect you want going to that.
Okay.
Here's another secret sneaky tool that you can do, getting away from effects for a second. But say you have a couple different mixes or a couple different outputs going to different places, but they're essentially the same thing, like you want the same things going to them, you can mix them the same and route them illegally. So say our mix that's going to the foyer, we just want to essentially double that and send it to the nursery. It doesn't have to be too intricate. We just want to do that. So I can hit nursery, Sounds on Fader, and I can